welcome to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and today's episode is brought to you by our featured patron, Leonago99.
Those screen names can get a little squirrely.
And today's bad idea is taking us back to May 2nd, 1845, Tony. We're in the town of Great Yarmouth in England. And on the River Bur, there are crowds of thousands of people lined up to see an amazing spectacle. There is a clown.
There's a clown. Oh, no.
Oh, yes, Tony. Because the circus is in town, baby. And they are trying to drum up some business, so they have sent out Nelson the Clown to call all the boys and girls to come to the circus. And Nelson the Clown is going to enter the River Bur at the drawbridge and sail downstream to the Yarmouth suspension bridge further downriver.
Is there any shtick to this? Is he like in a giant red, like orange, like nose ball or something like that? Like what's...
He's in a tub, which is being pulled by 4 geese.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on board.
So, circus clown in a tub. They didn't say what kind of tub. I couldn't tell if it was like a wash tub or like a full-size clawfoot type tub, but either way, it's kind of silly. And you've got these geese, quote-unquote, pulling him down the river, and he's waving at all these crowds, I'm sure yelling, "Come to the circus and see me again!" And he makes his way downriver, and as he goes, as I mentioned, there's thousands of people lining the banks. People start to crowd onto the Yarmouth suspension bridge. The Yarmouth suspension bridge is where he is going to be ending his run, and they're all excited to see him pass underneath and get up onto the shore. And it's estimated that 400 people were crowded up onto this bridge, and as he approached, they got all excited and they crowded over to one side of the Yarmouth suspension bridge.
I feel like this could happen, like with a modern Instagram type thing, if somebody was just like, oh yeah, like look at this thing, we all gotta get it on our timelines.
Potentially, yes. He's getting closer, they're getting more excited, they're pressing up against the railing of the bridge, and all of a sudden, there's a horrific crack sound. And this sound is the sound of one of the 4 metal rods that holds up the suspension weight of the bridge breaking apart. And everybody freaks out. There is a cry that goes up, "Get off the bridge, get off the bridge, get off the bridge." But it's too late because moments later, the second bar on the side that everybody has crowded onto cracks as well. And the whole bridge just suddenly goes vertical and dumps everybody on it into the water.
I think I saw this in like X-Men or something.
I don't think you saw this in any X-Men comic. This is horrifying because there are now 400 people in the river, and you'll recall this is a circus and a clown being pulled by geese. So many of these people are children, now being dumped into the dark waters of the River Bur.
Are you saying that these kids didn't float down there?
That is in poor taste, Tony, even 150 years later. But yes. So there's this instant where everybody's having a good time, and all of a sudden, that frivolity and fun and general good-heartedness has just turned to terror. The water is roiling around. It's sort of being sucked under the bridge, which is dragging down into the water. There's people splashing around, just piled on top of each other in the water, and everybody is going berserk. In a letter to a friend after the disaster, survivor Charles Warrens wrote, quote, "The chains on the Yarmouth side broke and let it down. Only on that side, remember, while the other side still hung all right. You will have an exact resemblance by letting the leaf of a table down. Not a timber or bar of the bridge broke, but it shot us all into the water. There we were. The screams were horrible. They were heard for miles. To supernatural presence of mind and a strong arm I owe my escape. I felt an iron under me and clung to it in a death grasp, my mouth full of salt water, for the tide was up.
How far did you say they plunged?
Well, the bridge itself ends up dragging in the water, so it's not a long fall. It's about the width of a bridge that was designed to carry 2 carriages. But it's a pretty wide river from what I could tell.
Yeah. And whenever it falls into that, it's still in the water, then you've got people being pushed into the bridge.
Pushed into the bridge, pushed into each other, pushed down underneath of each other. And so there's instant chaos. But despite that, many of the people who are watching from the shore leap into action and they start pulling people out of the water as fast as they can. There's a stream of bodies that just start flowing from the scene into any buildings nearby that are able to take them. A lot of times in this era, smaller cities wouldn't have a hospital, so emergency medical stuff would be done at a tavern, and a local tavern called Vauxhall Gardens took in a lot of these victims, and they just sort of turned into an assembly line where they would get people in, they would try to revive them. If they could, they would send them home. If they couldn't, well, they couldn't. So there was just this massive panic that's happening and people trying as hard as they can to save as many people as they can. And you have to consider, too, that this is the bridge that connects the 2 parts of this town. So if you're on one side of this bridge looking for someone who you know was on the bridge, they might be on the other side and you don't know about it.
Yeah, and there's no easy way to connect at all. Like, it would just be so hard to tell if somebody was just forever gone or if they just couldn't find you.
Well, unfortunately, 79 people were in fact forever gone, and the majority of these people, again, were children. And of course, in the aftermath of this disaster, people are very, very concerned with exactly what went wrong. So they hire a civil engineer named James Walker to conduct a thorough post-mortem on the bridge and figure out exactly what went wrong. And he comes back to the city council and reports the causes of the failure. And this is one of the Bad Ideas episodes where it's very, very clear exactly what the bad ideas were. As James Walker lays out for the city council, the first cause is that first rod that broke had been poorly welded. He actually brought it before them and showed them where the weld that was supposed to have connected the rod together was only about a third done. And he said either it was done wrong at the time or it rusted and became weak after, but it had not been strong for a very, very long time. So when everybody rushed to one side of the bridge, there was now 2 rods that were supposed to be holding up the weight of these 400 people, one of which was weak. When that rod failed, the other rod, which was not weak, but was not designed to hold up the entire weight of the bridge, shortly thereafter stretched out and failed also.
Yeah, I can't imagine many suspension bridges where it's strong enough to actually support that. Like, that just seems like that's too much weight, too much balance issues to actually like hold that up. Maybe something like the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that could, but those are much more deeply entrenched into the ground. There's
also the fact that, don't forget, this is 1845 and the technology of suspension bridges was still really being worked out. There were several engineers that said that suspension bridge wasn't even the right way to go here because of what they were trying to do. I'm not an engineer, so I can't really debate that, but that was at least an opinion that was bandied about at the time after the disaster.
I'm betting that welding technology changed a whole lot too.
There's a lot of technologies that have changed since 1845, yes.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know if I would trust a weld from that era. That doesn't seem like you would be able to get, like, a very clean weld. I don't know how they would even go about that back then.
The other problem that this civil engineer identified was the fact that the bridge, after its initial construction, had been widened. They had wanted to be able to get more traffic across the bridge, and it might be worth noting that this was a toll bridge. And so they added steel girders that came out from the sides of the original bridge and then put wood planks over top of those steel girders. So the bridge could hold more than it had initially been designed to hold, and people could get further to one side than they had initially been able to when the bridge was first built. So when all of these people come crushing over to the one side of the bridge, they're able to actually extend their weight out beyond the edges of the suspension rods.
So they're basically acting like a lever, like just putting more and more and more pressure on that one pole.
Correct. So adding all of that together, the fact that the bridge was not really designed to take all of that pressure on one side, the fact that one of the welds was faulty on the side that they were on, and the fact that they'd widened the bridge, all of these things conspired together to get 79 people killed. Despite the horror of this disaster, it seemed like the town just wanted to forget what had happened, and you can kind of understand this instinct. This was not a large town. They had, I think one estimate I read was about 2,000 people in the town. So for them to lose 79 people, of which the majority were children, it must have been just devastating and something that everybody would want to put behind them.
That's 4% of your town.
What? It's a lot. There's no real effort made to punish anybody involved with the construction of the bridge. The guy who owned the bridge doesn't get prosecuted or called on the carpet or anything. The guy who designed the bridge is not prosecuted. Nobody has any beef with him. It's just sort of allowed to go silent.
I don't even know how you would move forward with something like that. In a town that small, everybody had to have known somebody that died in that or was directly related to them.
It so damaged the town that it wasn't until 2013 that a memorial was erected to honor the victims of the disaster. You gotta think this is something that the people in this town just could not face. And to me, that was the most interesting thing about this particular bad idea. The actual ideas that led to this disaster are pretty cut and dried and technical, but the aftermath here really struck home with me.
That's a darker one than I expected. Whenever you hear bridge disaster, you know it's going to be messed up, but I didn't expect that today.
You don't expect it to be civilians, like, on foot being hurt in a bridge disaster.
Yeah, like whenever you hear about like the one from like Mothman and all that other stuff where it's like a bridge collapsed, a bunch of cars hit the water. You expect something like that and not near as many casualties, especially not young casualties.
Yeah, when I first read this, I could not wrap my head around the idea of how many kids there were and the fact that they were just out to see this clown and have a good time and then to be just gone in an instant it's pretty rough.
Well, if you're feeling good about that, you want to share this podcast, please do so with your friends.
Yeah, tell them the good news about the fun podcast we have about kids drowning to death and the entire community just trying to forget about it.
Yes. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/humanechoes. $2, $5, $10 a month. You get lots of different things for different tiers. And it's a great thing. You also get access to our bonus podcast. So thank you all for being our friends, for being patrons, and for listening.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.